Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Bumblebee could still feel the vibrations of the explosions as if they were rattling his circuits, even now. The battlefield was a blur of devastation and violence, with the sky burning in hues of orange and red, almost indistinguishable from the ground beneath his tires. War had taken its toll on him, but nothing had prepared Bumblebee for the kind of betrayal that had stripped him of more than just metal and oil. It was supposed to be a routine mission, another tactical strike against the Decepticons' war machine. Bumblebee had been given the lead on this one, which wasn't usual. His speed, stealth, and reliability had earned him that position countless times before. Optimus Prime had trusted him, and he had trusted his team right up until the moment everything fell apart. The battle was chaos. Decepticons and Autobots clashed violently, sending debris and energy bursts in all directions. Bumblebee had locked onto his target, focusing on taking down a key Decepticon stronghold when he saw him, Megatron, exposed and vulnerable more than 100 yards ahead. It was an opportunity too rare to pass up. He revived his engine, shifting into high gear as he raced toward Megatron, his weapon systems humming with readiness. But then, in the corner of his optic sensors, he caught movement. His second-in-command, a trusted Autobot, veered off-course, breaking formation. The moment of hesitation that followed was enough for the battlefield to shift beneath him. Megatron had seen him coming. Bumblebee felt the ground give way beneath him as he tumbled, an explosion ripping through the earth where he'd been just moments before. His vision went white, sparks shooting from his chassis as he collided with a pile of debris. The force of the blast had left him damaged, leaking coolant and oil, his systems barely able to maintain functionality. He struggled to get up, his body unresponsive. Megatron's cold laughter echoed in his audio receptors, cruel and mocking. Well, Bumblebee, Megatron sneered, stepping forward with his fusion cannon humming. You were always so eager to play the hero, aren't you? But today you die a failure. Bumblebee gritted his teeth, his optics flickering as he tried to pull himself up. His targeting systems were malfunctioning, and his weaponry was offline. He was defenseless. It was then that his second-in-command, the Autobot who had broken formation, retreated, leaving Bumblebee alone, surrounded by Decepticons betrayed. For the first time in his long service as an Autobot, Bumblebee felt something more than fear or pain. He felt rage, a deep burning anger that seared through him like molten metal. The betrayal left him broken in body and in spirit, but not dead. As Megatron's forces closed in, Bumblebee activated his emergency signal, transmitting a distress call before everything went dark. Bumblebee woke to the dim, sterile lighting of the Autobot base repair bay. His systems were sluggish, and pain radiated through his joints and frame. It took him a moment to remember where he was to realize he was still alive. Bumblebee Ratchetcell's voice came from beside him. The Autobot medic was busy working on his chest plate, sparks flying as he welded Bumblebee's Sud's internal systems back together. You were lucky we got to you in time. Another cycle out there, and you would then been scrap metal. Bumblebee's vocalizer cracked as he tried to speak where's Megatron. Ratchet looked grim, glancing toward Optimus Prime, who stood silently in the corner of the room, his optics filled with a somber understanding. Megatron escaped, Ratchet replied. We couldn't track him after the battle. You were the priority. I almost had him, Bumblebee muttered, his voice rasping. I could then ended it. But at what cost? Optimus's deep voice filled the room. His presence was commanding, even in the quiet. Bumblebee, you're one of our finest soldiers, but there's no place for vengeance in this war. It clouds judgment, and it destroys lives, both ours and theirs. Bumblebee fell silent, but inside his mind raced. Vengeance was all he had left. He had been betrayed, left to die at Megatron's feet. Optimus might preach peace and reason, but Bumblebee's circuits were alight with only one thought, revenge. As the weeks passed, Bumblebee PS repairs continued, but his mind grew darker. Every time he looked into the cracked glass of his reflection, he didn't see the young Autobot who once fought for justice. He saw a soldier broken, twisted by betrayal. He began spending more time alone, training relentlessly. His once playful demeanor had vanished, replaced by cold determination. His energy output increased dramatically, pushing his systems to the brink of overheating as he worked himself into the ground. He trained for hours longer than any Autobot would have recommended, running simulation after simulation, battle after battle, all designed for one thing: to kill Megatron. The other Autobots noticed his transformation. They whispered among themselves, worried about the toll the battle had taken on Bumblebee. Even Optimus tried to reason with him, pulling him aside one day as Bumblebee was about to enter the simulation room. "Bumblebee, you were pushing yourself too hard," Optimus said, his voice filled with concern. "What happened to you in that battle was tragic, but you cannot let it consume you." Bumblebee's size optics flashed with defiance. "You don't understand, Optimus. I could have ended this war right then and there." "And what would that have made you?" Optimus asked, his tone firm. "Would you have become the kind of leader we were fighting against, or worse? Would you have lost yourself in the process?" Bumblebee turned away, unwilling to listen. Optimus, didn't he understand the fire that was burning inside him? It wasn't just about ending the war, it was personal now. One night, Bumblebee made his decision. He couldn't stay with the Autobots, not while they clung to ideals of honor and peace. Not while they were willing to let Megatron slip through their fingers time and again. He needed to act, to take justice into his own hands. With a stealth that had once been his pride, Bumblebee slipped out of the Autobot base, taking a lone mission into enemy territory. His path was clear. He would track down Megatron, no matter the cost. As he drove through the barren wastelands of Cybertron, his scanners picked up signals from a group of rogue Decepticons. These were not the elite soldiers of Megatron's army, but outcasts, mercenaries, and bandits who had no loyalty to any cause but their own survival. Bumblebee knew he couldn't defeat Megatron alone. He needed allies, even if they were the kind that Optimus would have deemed unworthy. He found them in the ruins of an old Decepticon outpost, a small band of Decepticon deserters led by a hulking brute of a warrior known as Lockjaw. His reputation preceded him. Lockjaw was infamous for his ruthlessness and his willingness to work for anyone who could pay him in energon. Bumblebee approached cautiously, his weapon systems on standby. Lockjaw turned, his optics narrowing at the sight of the Autoboot insignia on Bumblebee's chest. Well, Lockjaw rumbled, stepping forward with a sneer. "An Autobot, and not just any Autobot, Bumblebee, right? What brings you out here? Lose your way, little scout." "I am not here for games," Bumblebee said coldly, stepping closer. "I am here to make a deal. You want to destroy Megatron as much as I do, help me, and you'll get what you want." Lockjaw's laughter boomed through the empty halls. "You think I will help you, an Autobot?" "I am not the Autobot I used to be," Bumblebee replied, his voice low, dangerous. "I am not here to fight for peace. I am here for revenge." Lockjaw's amusement faded, and he studied Bumblebee for a long moment. There was something different about the Autobot, something darker. Finally, Lockjaw nodded, a slow, calculating smile spreading across his face. "All right, Bumblebee, I'll help you, but understand this: once you go down this path, there's no coming back." "I am already too far gone," Bumblebee said, and in that moment, he believed it. Under Lockjaw's guidance, Bumblebee began a brutal campaign against Megatron's forces. They struck from the shadows, using guerrilla tactics to weaken Megatron's holdover key Decepticon outpost. Bumblebee found himself reveling in the violence, his attacks growing more vicious with each strike. The line between right and wrong, Autobot and Decepticon, blurred until it became nothing more than a distant memory. He didn't care anymore. All that mattered was getting closer to Megatron, and with every victory he felt that he was one step closer to avenging himself. But as the bodies piled up and the destruction mounted, even Lockjaw began to question Bumblebee's method. The Autobot who had once been known for his compassion and loyalty was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating warrior who would stop at nothing to achieve his goal. It wasn't until one fateful battle, when Bumblebee faced Starscream in a vicious duel, that he realized just how far he had fallen. "In command," taunted Bumblebee, his voice sharp and mocking. "Trey, you think you're any better than the rest of us? Bumblebee, look at you. You've abandoned everything you stood for. What are you now? Just another Decepticon in Autobot armor." The word sliced deeper than any blade could. Bumblebee knew Starscream was right, but in that moment, he didn't care. All he saw was an obstacle standing between him and Megatron. Starscream's taunts were drowned out by the hum of Bumblebee's sadpins as he engaged faster and more aggressive than ever before. Starscream, a skilled warrior in his own right, was no match for Bumblebee's Sci-Fury. Their battle raged through the ruins, metal clashing against metal, energy weapons firing in rapid bursts. The Bumblebee had the advantage. He was driven by a singular purpose, a rage that could not be quenched. He overpowered Starscream, knocking him to the ground with a vicious strike. The Decepticon tried to crawl away, his cocky demeanor crumbling as Bumblebee advanced on him, the cold glint of murder in his optic. You wouldn't dare, Starscream stammered, his usual bravado gone. You were an Autobot, you have rules, honor. Not anymore, Bumblebee growled without hesitation. He delivered the final blow, his fist crashing down on Starscream, spark extinguishing his life in an instant. There was a deafening silence in the aftermath. Bumblebee stood over the body, his chest heaving, his circuits surging with adrenaline. You did it! You killed Starscream, one of Megatron's most trusted lieutenants. But instead of satisfaction, all Bumblebee felt was emptiness. Lockjaw, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. That was brutal even for me. He said, I am starting to think you might be worse than the Decepticons you rehunted. Bumblebee said nothing, his optics still locked on Starscream's lifeless form. He had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. But there was no turning back now. Megatron was next. As they moved on, Bumblebee found himself haunted by what he had done. The thrill of battle that had once driven him now felt like a chain binding him to a path he no longer recognized. But the rage still simmered beneath his surface, pushing him forward. Their next target was Megatron's primary command center, deep within Decepticon-controlled territory. The journey was perilous, but with Starscream dead, Megatron's sense forces were in disarray. Bumblebee and Lockjaw cut through the chaos with ruthless efficiency, leaving destruction in their wake. When they reached the command center, Bumblebee felt his spark hammering in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The Decepticons guarding the entrance stood no chance. Bumblebee tore through them with precision, his optics cold and unfeeling. He was beyond mercy, now beyond hesitation. He was a force of vengeance, unstoppable and unrelenting. As they entered the command center, Megatron's towering form loomed before them. He stood with his back to them, staring out at the devastation beyond the walls, his fusion cannon resting casually at his side. So you've that come, Megatron said, his voice low and calm. He didn't bother turning around. I knew it was only a matter of time. Bumblebee raised his weapon, his optics narrowing. I am gonna finish this, Megatron, for good. Megatron finally turned to face him, a dark smile playing on his lip. You finish me, Dawn. Make me laugh, Bumblebee. You are nothing more than a pawn in a war you don't understand. Do you really think killing me will change anything? Bumblebee fired, but Megatron was faster. He deflected the blast with a casual flick of his arm, his fusion cannon humming with power as he stepped forward. You've grown stronger, I'll give you that. Megatron said, his voice filled with contempt, but you are still no match for me. The battle that followed was unlike anything Bumblebee had ever experienced. Megatron was a relentless force, his strikes precise and devastating. Bumblebee fought back with everything he had, but for every blow he landed, Megatron countered with twice the force. They clashed violently, the walls of the command center shaking with the intensity of their battle. Lockjaw tried to intervene, but a single strike from Megatron sent him crashing into a nearby console, his systems shutting down. Bumblebee was on his own. As the battle wore on, Bumblebee felt his strength waning, his systems were overheating, his weapons malfunctioning. Megatron was too powerful, too experienced. Bumblebee had always known this, but his thirst for revenge had blinded him to the reality of what he was facing. You ever fought well, Bumblebee? Megatron said, his voice calm and almost respectful, but this is where it ends. Bumblebee was on his knees now, his systems failing, his optics flickering. He looked up at Megatron, his vision blurred in that moment. Something shifted inside him. The rage that had fueled him for so long began to fade, replaced by something else. Clarity. This wasn't who he was. This wasn't who he wanted to be. As Megatron raised his fusion cannon for the final blow, Bumblebee closed his optics, waiting for the end, but it never came. Instead, there was a loud explosion, followed by the sound of metal clashing. Bumblebee opened his optics to see Optimus Prime standing tall and resolute, his sword clashing with Megatron as cannon. Enough, Megatron, Optimus said, his voice filled with authority. This ends now. Megatron snarled, pushing back against Optimus' blade, but the Autobot leader was unyielding. With a powerful strike, Optimus disarmed Megatron, sending his fusion cannon flying across the room. Bumblebee watched in awe as Optimus fought with a grace and power that he had always admired. This was what it meant to be a leader, to fight not out of hatred or vengeance, but out of duty and a desire for peace. Megatron, realizing he was outmatched, retreated, his optics burning with fury. "This isn't Tadava Prime," he spat before disappearing into the shadow. Optimus turned to Bumblebee, his expression stern but filled with compassion. "Bumblebee, are you all right?" Bumblebee struggled to his feet, his systems barely holding together. I don't know," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I wanted to kill him, Optimus. I wanted revenge." Optimus placed a hand on Bumblebee's shoulder, his optics softening. "Revenge is a dangerous path, Bumblebee. It consumes those who walk it, but you stopped. That's sorrow what mattered." Bumblebee looked away, guilt gnawing at him. "I killed Starscream. I became everything we were fighting against." Optimus nodded slowly. "We all make mistakes. Bumblebee, what matters is what we do next. You still have a choice. You can still be the Autobot you were meant to be." Bumblebee felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had been so lost in his desire for revenge that he had forgotten who he was. But now, standing in the ruins of his own decisions, he realized that he still had a chance to make things right. "I don't know if I can go back," Bumblebee said quietly. "You don't have to go back," Optimus replied. "You just have to move forward, one step at a time." Bumblebee looked around at the devastation he had helped, because the lives he had taken and the mistakes he had made. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't beyond saving, not yet. As they left the command center, Bumblebee walked beside Optimus, his steps slow but determined. The road to redemption would be long, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. But with Optimus by his side, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to the light. And as for Megatron, that battle would come another day. For now, Bumblebee's war was with himself, and it was a war he intended to win.